Dave Arnold, your host of Cooking Issues, coming to you live from the heart of Manhattan at Rockefeller Center Newsstand Studios. Joined as usual with John. How you doing, John?
Doing great, thanks.
I'm all like, if you're on Patreon, you can watch us right now, but I'm all confused cat because I'm turned around. I'm not in my normal seat. Joe's behind me, which is making me a little nervous. How you doing, Joe? Joe Hazen?
I'm doing great, man. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good
Happy
to see
Tuesday.
You. Oh, yeah. Every Tuesday. Happy. Always. We do not have Nastasia the Hammer Lopez today, but we do have Jackie Molecules, right?
Yes, we do.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Are you in
I'm
California or are you globetrotting?
I'm in California, though I will be in D.C. all of May, so.
Is that before it turns into a hellhole?
Yes. You mean what, in terms of humidity?
In terms of just, like, listen, I like D.C., like, I like the things you can do in D.C., but D.C. in the summer is like, oh my goodness. Like, why?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It truly is a swamp. I know.
Yeah. It's alternatively swampy and humid. So you go to D.C., everyone hates that I say this. You go to D.C., you go to the mall, right? You know how, like, all those walkways are all, like, dust and rocks? How could it simultaneously be so humid and so dusty at the same time? How do you get both? So that your legs are filthy. Like, when you walk around, this is one... I mean, I don't wear shorts, period. But if I was going to wear shorts, I would never wear shorts in D.C. no matter how hot it got because your legs are just freaking filthy if you go on that mall thing, if you're doing the tourist action. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
No offense, D.C.
Great city, though. Love D.C.
Yeah. I mean, how many years you lived there? How many years you do the radio there?
The 4 years.
Yeah.
So.
All right. And tacking in the upper left-hand corner of Cooking Issues, Quinn, how you doing on the Vancouver Island?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Yeah? All right. Good. And today's special guests, which we will introduce before we shoot the breeze too much, are Sarah and Kaitlin Leung from The Walks of Life, the well-known blog / the cookbook is out / all this stuff's coming to you since 2013. How you guys doing?
Hey, Dave. Doing good.
Yeah.
All right. Excited to be here.
We're happy to have you. So I think Quinn was especially excited that you guys were coming on today. Is that true, Quinn? Super especially excited?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean, not that we're all excited, but anyway, so this is the portion of the show where, well, before we do this, let's give out the number, John, right? Before we shoot the breeze, let's give out the number. People who are listening live on Patreon can call in their questions to 917-410-1507. That's 917-410-1507. And if they want to become a Patreon member so they can listen live, what should they do, John?
Patreon.com/cooking issues. There's a bunch of tiered level memberships. You get awesome perks at every level. Cooking Issues, Google Map access where everyone puts in their favorite restaurants around the world, access to the video stream, discounts to Kitchen Arts and Letters, just a whole bunch of great things. So check it out, patreon.com/cooking issues.
And I'm considering, by the way, doing a voiding the warranty with Dave Arnold kind of a situation where we put some of it out on the regular internets, but some of it just for the Patreon. I've got some very good warranty voiding coming up. I already voided the warranty on my what's it called? My frozen drink machine, and I'm about to seriously void the warranty on my countertop fryer. Countertop fryers are disappointing.
I've
feel
never
like,
tried
is
one.
that surprising though?
Well, also like I feel like my home range is ridiculous. So like I can actually do decent frying on my home range, but like everything depends on what kind of frying you do. You know what I'm saying? So like I do a lot of like classic American frying where the products have been dusted, so it's like it ends with a dry coat instead of ending with a wet coat.
Yep.
And you know, anytime you end with a dry coat, stuff sinks to the bottom, burns,
and you end up with all that burnt like flour at the
and
those
then
little particles.
And then because you're not using enough oil, you're cycling, those particles burn, oil goes bad. Even within one frying session, oil can go bad. So like, you know, even home fryers like that aren't donut style, that aren't the Fry Daddy kettle kind, or the wide, you know, they have a little bit of a cold zone, so it can preserve you if you're doing that kind of. And in fact, we're going to talk later when I talk to you about some of the recipes in the book about specifically the wing recipe. I know that's. I think it's your dad credited for that. But anyway, we'll talk. We'll talk about it. But the power is just too low. You know what I mean? So like, and even a home stove, the power, most people's home stove is only like 20,000 BTU. You know what I mean? If, 25 maybe if they're in a semi-pro, and it's just not enough. So to get a reasonable amount of power into a home fryer, a wall socket ain't doing it. Just ain't doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I figured, I'll give you the basic gist. What if you took 2 fryer elements and you squished, you bent the fryer elements so that both fryer elements could fit in the bottom of the fryer, and then you plugged it into 2 sockets at once, and now you're at 3.2 kilowatts of power. Now I can fry something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm thinking about it. Join the Patreon, and you get such things as a discounted the walks of life. Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, the book. From Kitchen Arts and Letters. So we give a discount to our Patreon folks for buying the whatever the book of the person who's coming.
Very nice. And I know they have a cache of signed copies right now. So.
Oh, nice. Aren't they good people?
Yeah.
They're awesome.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the part of the show where we talk about interesting things that have happened to us that are relatively food related over the past week or so. So do you guys have anything?
So we were recently in Flushing over the weekend with family, and we went to the new outpost of Wu's Wonton King. If you've ever been there in Manhattan, Chinatown, they have a new restaurant out in Flushing. And we splurged on a king crab, which I haven't had in a really long time, because it's pretty
exorbitantly
pricey.
expensive.
Yeah, but we were kind of celebrating because we hadn't seen some of these family members in a while, and steamed king crab legs with just garlic.
It's like a soy saucy garlic, though.
Yeah, but I was like, wow.
Do they do the live?
Oh yeah,
It is live.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
It's
they
like
bring it out.
$600 now.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. This one, so the key move here is to do the set menu, which in this case, it was a table of 10 people. It was about $600 for the crab plus 8 other dishes.
That's not so bad.
I mean, at least you feel like you're like, okay, the crab is like maybe like 3/4 of that,
Yeah.
and then
show me the body size. Show me the body size with your hands. Well, that's the whole
Well,
thing.
that's supposed to lay. So
Oh,
the body size
the body
was
was like this.
Yeah.
Ah, good.
yeah.
No,
It was 7
delicious.
pounds. 7 pounds. Not bad.
It's going to make you mad. I've only ever cooked live king crab twice, and they only cost at the time, I think, like $150.
Oh my God.
We used to get them from
What a time.
True World. Yeah, we used to get them from True World Food, and maybe I cooked it 3. We used to get it I used to teach at the French Culinary Institute, and I used to do demonstrations, and we were, let's say, for a demonstration, we were price insensitive, and so like I could get some messed up ingredients. But yeah, so how many dishes did they make with it?
So they made 2. They made the steamed crab with just the legs.
Right. And what was the sauce you said was on it?
It was mostly
It's
garlic.
like garlic, but like softened
a
so that
touch
it's
of
like
soy sauce.
sweet with a touch of soy sauce.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Just you could just taste the sweetness of the crab. The other way to get it normally is fried, but I think steamed is just
Yeah,
more-
we had
come
a
on.
little tableside debate because I was like, I kind of wish it was fried, and Sarah's like, no.
No. Do all of your fancy skullduggery with the body.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
You know what I mean? Like all the flavors, all the textures. Like you're paying infinity for the meat.
Yeah. And then they did a fried rice with the body.
Oh yeah, that's delicious.
Yeah, it was
That's
good.
stupid good.
it was good.
It was good. We actually have a similar recipe in the book. We could call it our special golden fried rice, and it was actually inspired by this restaurant.
The one with the egg?
Yes, so there's like egg yolk fried. So you get this like those little like strips of like wispy
Like
egg yolk.
threads of egg.
Yeah, threads.
I forget? Do you do that one in the oil? Or,
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
With the sound effect.
And then golden raisins, which is like a bit of a weird flex, but really good. Really good.
All right. Now I'm jealous. I got some FOMO. It's been so many years since I've had the king crab. Do you think the price is going to go down, or do you think it's going to keep going up? Are we overfishing the hell out of that?
I think we are.
are.
I think there was actually a king crab shortage recently. Like they were like, oh, no king crab, which is why I was surprised to see it at this restaurant. But yeah, I mean, we haven't had one in like many, many years either, and definitely reserved for special occasions because it is so pricey and relatively scarce.
Right. And the other thing about any kind of crustacean is you definitely want to buy it from a place that has like high throughput.
Yeah.
Because like, if you're going to like, everyone knows I'm talking about like a pseudo fancy place where they have like the one and they keep it alive for like, you know what I mean? It's like the longer those things stay in the tanks.
Yeah,
like they basically I'm told, I don't know that much about crabs actually, to be honest, but like lobster tanks, those things are basically eating themselves once they get put in the tank. So, you want them as soon as they come out of the water as possible. But, these places, it's a business for them. So they're probably coming in styro right off of an airplane into their tank, into your mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Everything in Flushing is just super fresh. Like the vegetables, the seafood. Like we were walking after dinner and my dad was like, ugh, the seafood's just so much better here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, you're, okay, well, we haven't, John, do you have any good food stories for the week? Anything?
No, nothing really, unfortunately.
No.
Well, I feel like I have another one out of Flushing.
Yeah.
So it was actually before dinner. So we had a little bit of the munchies because we had a book event at the Queens Public Library. And then we were walking around Flushing Main Street.
Go QPL. My wife's designing a QPL right now.
Oh, very nice.
Or redesign, they're redoing, yeah. QPL.
So we were walking back to the parking lot. And there's a chwar man. So chwar is like a kebab. That's like the Chinese word for kebab. So the Chinese character is actually cool. Like it looks like a little, like 2 cubes of meat on a stick.
Strong.
Yeah.
So it must be an old school character.
Yes, very old school.
Or old school recipe, I mean. If the character looks like the recipe, it's got to be old school.
It's been around for a while. Yeah. One of the more intuitive Chinese characters out there. And I said to my mom, I was like, oh, let's definitely get some. And everybody was like, yeah, everybody was on board, like super excited. And we ended up waiting in line for like kind of a really long time. And I was like standing there and I was like, did the guys in front of us just order like 40 chwar or something? I was like, what's going on? And then as I was standing there, I was looking and I was like, this is a philosophical difference on like chwar grilling because they had like the special little narrow grill. It was all very quote unquote authentic or traditional or what you would expect. But it was taking so long to just like cook a few chwar. And I was like, I guess they're doing it like kind of like low and slow where it like gets like perfectly golden. Whereas like if I do chwar at home, which there's a recipe in the cookbook actually, I do it over a natural like lump charcoal grill, Big Green Egg, little plug for Big Green Egg. And like the flame's like high, and I'm like, oh, this is great. The bamboo skewers get a little char. That's fine. That's part of the allure.
You're not going to eat the bamboo anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get little char bits on the edges. But these guys were like so studious about their just like perfect golden exterior. And I was like, I guess.
Not gonna lie, I didn't hate it.
No, it was delicious,
Yeah.
but we waited forever.
Yeah.
Like Sarah bailed out and sat in the car.
Strong.
And then like 15 minutes later, we were like rolling up with the 5 chwar sticks that we like waited forever for. And my grandma was like, oh, we shouldn't have done this.
No, man. But you're like, but what I'm hearing from you is not worth it's not bad, but make it the fast way. First of all, why not just go 3 times, have it 3/4 of the way done, and then have a giant freaking pile of them.
Right.
And then go shap, high heat.
Yeah. And I kind of was like wondering to myself, I was like, are people complaining if there's a little char to it? Like, is this just like philosophical difference on grilling meat? Maybe.
And this is in a cart.
In a cart.
Yeah.
On the corner of a street in Flushing.
No, a cart is not a waiting sitch.
Right. That's why I was like, what is going? Because I was like blaming it all on the 2 guys in front of us. It's like 2 Cantonese guys that were like, shooting the breeze while waiting for their chwar. I was like, did you people order like 40 of these things? Like, why are we waiting for so long? And they didn't even order that. I saw them get their order. They had like 5 also. And I was like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. So this is like the opposite of the 2 hot dogs for $1 folks. Where we used to punk them. How many can you do? And we would get like 100. And they're like, fine. You know what I mean? Just go. You know what I mean? Or like the bun guy at Sambar way back in the day, Dave Chang's place, Sonito. Yeah. You could just tell him anything, fire, and you just make up a number. He's like, fine. And it just goes. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, that's the way to do it, not like,
Yeah.
Right, even at home, that's grating.
Yeah. So I was a little disappointed. And it kind of set me on like a little odyssey in my own head. I was like, is it better to do low and slow? Not sure.
Well, you can do low and slow, but just do it before I show up. And then that's the other way, right? So like, in John's, well, you're not from. Do you have dual citizenship? Do you have any? Yeah. All right. So he's Belgian, right? And so there's two kinds of places, right? The place that makes so many waffles that they just have all of the irons rocking all the time, and you get fresh. And that's where you should go, right? But they just buy more equipment and more people. You know what I mean? And you wait in a long line for it, but it's a thing you know you have to wait for, or they sandbag them and reheat them, which is not as good, John.
Agreed. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. How about you, Quinn? You got anything?
Actually, yeah, we actually fired up one of those little charcoal grills as well, like a yakitori style, but just lump charcoal, and then we actually did just big ribeyes over that. And then we did like a classic sort of steakhouse style dinner for Easter.
Oh yeah,
Yummy.
yeah, steak for Easter, huh? Not a ham family.
Yeah, it was like we were sort of like a late my mom's birthday Easter dinner. So.
I once took a whole bunch of Searsalls, turned them like face up, and did like infinity yakitori. It was nuts. Oh my God, it was so hot. What about you, Jack? Anything? Got anything?
I've been in like total goblin mode because my girlfriend's out of town, so it's sort of like instant ramen hours over here, which, number one, I have to say I think Bulldog, the spicy chicken ramen, has to be the best one on the market.
That's your favorite? That's what you go for?
That's the one. And I think I've perfected it to American cheese, an egg, and kimchi supplementing it. And that's in the sweet spot.
So like you are like, how much younger are you than me? Because there's like a divide. Like when I grew up, there weren't a lot of like white folk ramen doctoring. You know what I mean? Like, whereas now I feel like everybody does ramen doctoring. I feel like,
Yeah, I think
that wasn't something that, we did. You know what I mean? Like,
we were doing it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, there were only so many brands, and I have to say I did have a little bit of a reaction when you were like, oh, that's the best ramen. Because you have to distinguish the Korean brands, Top Dog, versus Chinese brands. And then if you go really deep, there's like Malaysian and all this other stuff. But I can respect the American cheese slice.
Yeah. Hey, you know what's
fair?
It's just semi.
Samyang is the one. It's like the black container.
Yeah. You know what's a pre-made sauce that is apparently very popular that I can't wrap my head around as like a Northeastern white dude is Vermont curry. Man, I don't like that.
Vermont curry.
Have you had that one?
Yeah, I have.
What is
I think
that?
it's all right. It's a little sweet. It's on the sweet side.
Yeah.
Wait, what is
They're
it?
the curry roux, the like Japanese box
I
curry
can't
roux.
wrap my head around it. That's one of those
Why?
things I can't. I don't know why. I also don't like. This is weird because I love like what we would call quote unquote curry, both in the sense of like Madras style and in the sense of like Thai style. Like I like curries. I don't really like currywurst either. The German thing. You know what I mean?
That's not my favorite
that's
either.
not my thing.
Yeah.
I don't understand why a whole country is like yes. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. What about you, John? Anything? You
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I like currywurst. I haven't had the Vermont curry stuff. But yeah, currywurst is, I don't know. It's odd, but it hits a spot.
Okay.
We do have a from scratch Japanese curry sauce on the blog that we use S&B Oriental curry powder. Have you ever tried that?
Wait, was that yellow
It's
and
a little
red?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a little red
Yeah.
like canister.
Yeah.
That one's really good. Maybe give that a try and see if you're just like anti-curry or if you're anti-Vermont.
No, Vermont curry. It's the sweet. It's the whole.
It's the
super
Japanese
sweet. Yeah, I'm like, no, thank you. No. What about you, Joe? Anything good?
Nothing for me.
All right. I got two real quick. One, I did I quickly posted that what I'm just going to call it. Don't anyone get offended. I'm going to call it Turkish coffee so that everyone knows what we're talking about, right? Even though like if you're from a different country in that area, you don't call it Turkish coffee because you might not get along with Turkish people, and you're like, we also make this coffee and have made this coffee forever.
I see.
Anyway, So Specialty Turkish Coffee is a place, it's a company, and they make the pots, the Jezve, the little pots. And so I posted I was with a really crappy one I bought at, I've got it at Kalustian's, which is an amazing store here, but like, it's not like they're selling the highest quality, Turkish coffee pots, right? And he sent me one, and it is the best. You ever buy something, or I didn't buy it in this case, he sent it to me, but you ever have someone hand you something and you're like, oh, crap. It feels so good. You know what I mean? Like it was 2.5 or like 1.5 times or over twice as heavy as the one that I had, all copper. The tinning was perfect. Like everything was made by somebody that cared about it.
Yeah.
And you also need to have the right size. The reason I rebought is because if it's too big, you're not going to get the foam for the one cup that you're making. And I'm the only one in the house that's going to be drinking it. So he sent me this whole setup, and I was just like, oh my God. Because a lot of that coffee is very ritual based. You know what I mean? The ritual of making it. And so he sent that, and I was like, oh, crap. And it is more money. Like it's a $60 thing instead of a $15 thing.
Right.
But it's definitely, if it's going to be a part of your daily routine, like as an object, every time I pick it up, I'm like, oh. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It feels good. I don't know, like, there's some things I care about, and they're usually hand tools and kitchen tools if I'm going to use them a lot. And if they're something like that, I like them to be good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Speaking of, I noticed that you guys use occasionally one of the traditional round chopping block things. You like that? They're a pain in the butt though, right? Or do you just photograph on that stump sometimes?
We usually photograph on that stump.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like one of those.
So you don't keep it in water all the time and have it all that.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
We're not oiling it or anything.
Yeah.
I will say my grandma has one that is basically, I didn't realize you had to keep them wet, but it is perpetually wet because she just has it, that's her only cutting board. It's like this big. I kid you not.
And it's just like everything's done on that.
Everything. And like I was cooking in her kitchen like a few months ago, and I was like, it's so small. Everything just started falling off. But there is something about it. It's very solid. It has a comforting quality.
So back at MoFad, Museum of Food and Drink, when we had the exhibit Chow up, the person who was running the kitchen, his name is John Hutt, and he was experimenting with. Remember all those experiments he did with cutting blocks?
Yeah, it took like 3 or 4 of them to get them right, but yeah, they were so heavy. They were huge.
He was. I even brought him a stump from Connecticut. I'm like, you want a stump? You want me to rip you off some cookies? And you know what I mean? Like, they're thicker than cookies. But anyway, pain in the butt. The other thing that happened to me, John, you might be interested, is we're working on this. We make this thing, Spinzall, which is a centrifuge for bars. And we've been out of stock for 3 years, because the pandemic and the factory wouldn't remake them. And they finally have said, well, we're making you the pre-prototype so I can approve it, and then they can make the tooling, right? Or it's a modification because the tooling already exists, right? There's modifying some of the tools. So when you make a prototype, you don't always make it out of what's called engineering plastic, right? You make it out of like a prototyping plastic that like looks good. And they made a couple of design decisions that, let's say, I don't necessarily agree with. And when they shipped it, those design decisions, they put weights in it, right? And the weights came off. You ever when I was a kid, when you ordered something from the mail, right? It would say 4 to 6 weeks. So you would get a catalog in the mail. You would order something. You would literally put a check into the envelope with your address. You would, on a piece of paper, you would write down the catalog number you wanted, the size, or whatever. And then every day you'd be like, Mom, has it been 4 to 6 weeks? Yeah, it's been 4 to 6 weeks. And that's kind of what, that's what life was like back then. But that's what it was like to wait for this freaking thing. It's been a long wait. It shows up. The weights they had put in, they didn't bolt in a way that made sense. So this is the opposite of the Turkish coffee pot. The weights, here's what's even funnier, right? It was in a giant box. It cost $460 to ship it to me from Hong Kong, right? So I paid for shipping from Shenzhen to our agent in Hong Kong, and then I paid $460 for express FedEx to get this box from Hong Kong to me, right? And I open it up and I'm like, ooh, because it's like a layer of styrofoam, a layer of foam, and then a layer of like the long bubble wrap that you use for like wine bottles, right? So then I'm like, I cut it open, I open it up, and it's shards. Shards. When I say shards, I mean it's like you took a vase and threw it across the room. And what had happened was is they had these 1.5 pound weights that were like bolted inside the thing, and because they were bolted to not engineering plastic and they didn't have like a big washer, as soon as they hit like, you know, in the airplane or in the truck, they hit a bump, the weights snapped off and then just started going boop, 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 rattling around, shattering everything.
Oh my
It's like, oh, just a pile of like, looked like broken glass. I was like, sat down, made myself some Turkish coffee.
There you go.
You know? But yeah, those are my semi-food related nightmares. I don't know if I had any amazing food stories. Although, John, I did a reverse you where my parents asked me to bring an angel food cake to Easter. So I made an angel food cake and then yesterday used the yolks for a carbonara.
Oh, nice. Good move.
Yeah. John has this absurdly large number of egg yolk carbonara recipe.
Well, it doesn't seem absurdly large when you're just doing one portion at a time.
Yeah.
How many egg yolks?
2 egg yolks for 80 grams of pasta, dried pasta.
So a pound of pasta is 12 egg yolks.
Right. When you say it, the single version.
Yeah,
I'm like,
That's how I think of it.
Yeah. Although I cheated yesterday. I put some of that Spanish fish sauce, the garum.
Ooh, how was it?
Delicious. That stuff is so good, but it costs too much. It just costs too much. It's like
is it?
between $20 and $30. So like they're doing like a fish sauce in the style of like a Roman fish sauce.
yeah.
So the only other fish sauce that tastes similar to it to me is the Japanese one, the ashiri, because it's made from like fish guts,
Right.
right? So it's got a different flavor. It's more like canned meat. It's less like regular fish sauce and more like a mixture of fish sauce and canned what's that company with
Spam?
Spam?
no, the one with the Satan on it.
Satan?
It's Satan. It's like wrapped in paper. It's a can of meat wrapped in paper with Satan.
Corned beef?
No, it's deviled ham and potted meat, but it's all the same. It's Satan is on the can. Anyway, so it's like a mixture of that. I mean, colloquially, like kind of that dog food, that like wet dog food smell, which I love. I mean, I don't eat wet dog food, but
Well, okay, yeah. Plug for the like corned beef hash, the canned one. I do love that.
me too.
Yeah.
Hormel?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing to order at a diner.
Same.
Yes. Yeah. And let's see how far we go. I always order 2 eggs, sunny side up, runny, and rye toast.
Not runny, but I used to be runny, and for sure rye toast.
Yeah.
Only choice.
What have you moved to? Still fried eggs, or do you go scrambled or poached instead?
I'm a scrambled gal now.
See, I just when you break the yolk and it goes into the hash.
But then I feel like it just disappears. And as I get older, I want the experience of having the perfect scrambled egg.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
also, it's just
What's your perfect scrambled egg?
I do it the Cantonese way with a little cornstarch to like keep it firm, and then just like usually a little spinach because I'm trying to be healthy. And then if I'm doing like a Chinese breakfast thing or like a lunch or like really anytime thing, I'll put in duojiao, which is a salted chili, a Hunan salted chili. Delish.
So what level of wetness is the salted chili?
Pretty wet.
It's wet.
Pretty wet. So you like fry those in oil lightly to just get rid of some of the water. And then you go in with the egg, and then it all sort of just levels out. You don't have to like crisp anything, or you don't have to like really cook off all the liquid. You actually want to keep that like briny flavor straight out of the jar. Very good.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but I buy this. Years ago, I did an event in Taiwan, and they had these like preserved chili that everyone would buy. And then I buy a similar thing, but the one that I get's from the mainland, but I don't know what it's called.
It might be.
It might be
the
what
same.
we're talking about.
It comes in what looks like a little pickle barrel. It's like half gallon. It's like bright red. The seeds and everything. It's all hacked up. It's got like a yellow top on it.
It could be.
That's probably. It's not
A
that
lot of salt.
big.
A lot
but-
of salt.
Yeah, very,
It's very
salty.
salty.
I
A
think
lot
we're
of
talking about the
MSG.
same
A lot
thing.
of salt. It's good.
Yeah, it's really
I use
good.
the hell out of that.
Yeah.
It's like that between that stuff and the Lao Mao stuff. Like, although, okay, so in your book, right? Like, in your book. Now, wait, is this the chili oil? Is that a Kaitlin thing or a Sarah thing?
That's a Caitlin thing.
All right, so
That's a me thing.
so like, okay, so talk to me because like 20% of the recipes contain it as an ingredient. Okay, now, I'm on board, except what is the benefit of making it yourself as opposed to buying one of the commercial ones that's out there?
Right. So we just a few weeks ago or so put out a post on like which store-bought chili oil is best, because we get this question often. And the reality is that there are chili oil equivalents in the market now because it's so popular, right? I think you'd be hard pressed to find that if this was like 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But now, because it's so popular, like all of the Chinese food importers are like hip to the groove and kind of have released like a bog standard chili oil that's kind of like similar to what we have in our recipe. But they just don't taste the same. Like there's something about it that has that more like sitting around for a while flavor. You can find ones that are pretty good. And in the post we do dub a Victor. But honestly, the homemade version
I like how you're like, you got to go read it to find out.
Well, the brands are kind of convoluted, so it's not like it's like a super instantly recognizable brand. But yeah, I mean, homemade, so much more fragrant. You do have to buy some fiddly things, but we kind of stack it such that like if you have like the bare minimum versus like the moderate versus like the souped up version. But yeah, it just has more fragrance. It has more flavor. You get that like sizzly effect, and it doesn't like fade into like the process of like making something like mass produced. You know what I mean? Like the flavor like is maintained. And yeah, I think also there's been a lot of like line blurring between like chili oil and chili crisp.
Yeah, because I use a lot of crisp because I like high solids. Right.
I love a high solid. That's actually pretty polarizing, so I'm glad to hear you say that, because I like a high solid too, but a lot of people are like, no, I just want the oil. So if you only want the oil, first of all, you can customize that at home. But yeah, chili crisps are just saltier. They have different flavors going on. So people will say on the blog that they make like mapo tofu with like a chili crisp, and I'm like, okay, more power to you. But like in my mind, that's too much salt. Because like there's a spicy bean paste that goes into the mapo tofu that's already really salty. So you're kind of pushing your luck if you start adding like super salty like lao gan ma in there also, you know? So that's why we tend to prefer a homemade version, because there's no salt. I mean, you can add salt if you want, delicious, but there's no salt. It's more fragrant. It's pretty easy. And it's
also more designed for cooking, right? I feel like what we found in a lot of the chili oils that we tested was that the chili oil cook level, like of the flake, had gone too far. So like when you pull the flakes out of the oil, you're like, oh, that's like almost black,
right?
You know. And so if you're going to cook it again, adding it to another dish, it's going to be like way beyond cooked.
So again,
and a little burnt,
all the way scorched. I don't think people appreciate like when chili peppers, like sometimes they're good, kind of burnt in some recipes, but I don't like the bitterness of a burnt chili.
Philosophical difference because
of a burnt dried chili.
Right.
A wet chili, you blister the outside.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But like I did like an experiment, like because my chili oil recipe has been so like through the gauntlet over the years of like people making it. It's like, oh, it's whatever. It's been refined. But yeah, like I think a lot of people get like hyped in the sizzle moment when you pour the oil over the chili flakes and it's like the bubbles rise up and everybody's like, oh my God, so good. And at the end, sometimes it is the case that they are blackened, and that can lead to bitterness. Some people like that, go gaga for that. I respect it. But I like more of like a bright red color. And that's what you get most of the time. That's what you get at home. It's what you can get some of the time from the store shelf, but is like hit or miss. Like a lot of like, artisanal chili oils that are like out now, like they have that like black quality.
I don't know. Yeah, some of the ones I've tried, some of them, I'm not going to call anybody out, but like there's rancidity going on because the heat level's been too high. They get cardboard aromas, like paint aromas, like weird. I'm like, no.
Right.
No.
Like we tried all of them on like a blank canvas of like a very basic store-bought dumpling, like very little
oiled.
Yeah, like extra flavors going on. And we just weren't impressed. Like for exactly the reason you said, it was just like tasted kind of old.
Yeah.
I
had one that I tried that my wife was literally like, "This tastes like poison," but interestingly, like I let it open, and the poisonousness kind of flashed off.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very
I don't know what it
interesting.
was, but
Weird.
she was like, "That's not so poisonous anymore." I'm like, "That's still not a ringing endorsement." Does
needed
anyone?
to aerate.
In the 70s, people used to, when they said chili oil at the Chinese restaurants, it was literally just oil. Does anyone even use that anymore? Is that even a thing anymore?
I don't know that that's really a thing anymore. I feel like on the table, it's usually a little plastic canister with flake at the bottom, and
Yeah.
you can kind of pick as you wish, like how much solid you want. And then at the dim sum places too, actually, like we used to only be able to get chili garlic sauce, like sambal.
Right.
And now they're serving chili oil, or it's not that hard. Like you don't necessarily have to ask for the chili oil; they'll like put it out, and they're solid in there. So I feel like they're making it in house. I think it's more common, and it's less so coming out of an industrial.
But you
automatic
still,
cheating.
you still see those little bottles where it's just red oil in
Yeah.
the store. And I'm like,
When do we see that?
I see
haven't seen
it at
that in years.
99 Ranch still.
Oh, okay.
And I glaze right over it.
Yeah.
But they're there. And I'm like, how long have those been there?
Right, does your mind just erase it as you pass your mind?
exactly.
It's just like there's a blank zone there.
Yeah, I'm just like,
Yeah. I bet you some people cheat though. Like in other words, like you know Heinz ketchup.
yes.
They have an advertisement where they admit that people fill Heinz bottles with fake ketchup. And I was kind of a weird advertisement, but I was like passing by, and they were like, even when it's not Heinz, it has to be Heinz. And they have a picture of a person squeezing bullcrap ketchup into
It's
a Heinz
outstanding advertising. It really
wow.
is. They're
Goodness.
marrying other ketchups into the Heinz ketchup bottle because everyone wants Heinz.
bottle. Yeah. So I
Yes.
bet you something's happening with. I bet you
That's
because
interesting.
restaurants, a lot of them don't have probably time to make their own, especially because if other people do a good job. But you're saying I'm going to make your recipe though, because like. I mean, I spend a lot of money on crisp. I am a crisp guy, though. I am a crisp guy, and I'll take it with or without the peanuts in it. But I am a crisp guy.
Well, we're all crisp people, I think we've seen over the past several years. But each one has its occasion.
Yeah. yeah. All right. All right. So I'll be remiss. We should talk about what the blog is and kind of the. I mean, it's kind of a unique proposition, right? Like, so the Walks of Life, you started 2013.
Yep.
Right.
June 2013.
Right. And then, I'm sure everyone asks you like the origin story a million times, so I'm not going to force you through that. People, but it is incredibly rare, as you know, for a whole family to do a project like this. There's been like, one parent, one kid, or, but to have kind of a collaborative four people, 2-generation, 2 siblings, 2 parents, like culinary odyssey that, 10-year culinary odyssey is kind of unheard of. And I'm sure that's a huge part of, the appeal for you guys, right? And I know it's a huge part of appeal for your readers. But the other part about this, I think, really interesting, for those who don't know, go to the Walks of Life and check it out. But it's is that it's got because you're all different people. Like one person had worked in restaurants for a long time. One person grew. One person's more from Cantonese side. One person's more from Shanghai side. There's the American-born Chinese experience in it, and like so basically anything and nothing can or could be quote unquote authentic. I hate the term authenticity as it's applied to American Chinese food. We could talk about this later, or any food in general, not just Chinese food, all foods. Authenticity, it's like, when people talk about it, because what the hell does that mean? People eat food. If it's theirs, it's authentic. Whatever. We'll get into it because people have asked questions. So just, I don't know. It's not a question, but why don't you like talk about this like, weird amalgam and kind of how you have the ability to, you say that you don't like that you can mess up any recipe, and then on the other hand is talking to Kaitlin. But then you have on the other hand, the dad who was a restaurant chef, and the mom who's been. So it's kind of its amazing amalgam. You want to say anything to that, or just leave it where it lies? Or
Yeah, I think. Well, the blog started as a family project out of necessity because it it was the case that we started it because Kaitlin and I like wanted to learn the food that my parents prepared for us growing up, and we realized that even though we loved to cook, we had no idea how to put dishes on the table that were Chinese because they weren't written down, right? And we didn't like to learn by watching. Like it didn't feel as intuitive, and also like our parents would be like, oh, go do your homework and get out of the kitchen. So we started the blog together for that reason, because essentially like we knew nothing and my parents knew everything. That's how it kind of started. Over the years, Kaitlin and I have become a lot more knowledgeable and proficient in this, and so that has been kind of the coolest aspect of it, is to see like it going from this like knowledge passing project to more of just like all of us on equal footing developing our own recipes, and then like really seeing the sort of like differences, as you mentioned, kind of coming out from that, right? So like my dad did grow up cooking in restaurants with his father, his stepfather, and his grandfather as well was a chef. And my mom grew up in China, and her food experience was extremely different, not just culturally, but also, from a political context. Like she was growing up during the Cultural Revolution. And then my sister and I basically just translating my parents' cooking, and then also sort of just exploring the dishes that we grew up eating that weren't even necessarily part of like a Shanghainese or Cantonese tradition. So maybe it was partially like going out to restaurants, like trying Sichuan food for the first time, like traveling in China. So yeah, we tried to kind of put all of those things in the blog and the book. And hopefully at the same time, expand people's view of what Chinese food is. Because I think that here in the US, it's very sort of, at least up until recently, when we've seen a lot more sort of regional Chinese cooking coming into the US, it's been very Cantonese focused, because most of Chinese immigrants to the US throughout history have been from southern China, have brought that cuisine here, and it's sort of also evolved into its own branch of Chinese American cuisine. But yeah, we just hope to sort of like bring these regional dishes also to people's attention and really expand people's view of Chinese food and how varied it is.
Yeah, so I know Quinn was interested in this idea of developing recipes with your family. Quinn, what was it specifically you wanted to ask?
Oh, I was just saying that would not work with my family.
I think that's most people's natural reaction when they hear about what we do.
I mean, well, one of the things I was, reading about it, reading like the bio in the book, and also like Food Network profiles, et cetera, is that I'm sure everyone, and apparently you self-claim certain roles within the thing, but everyone I'm sure wants to pigeonhole everyone in the project into their own silo. And we were talking before the program came on that it's got to be irritating, right? I find it kind of irritating.
Yeah, I think everybody's like sort of natural thing is just to like kind of, everybody wants to like give you a role. It's like, oh, what's your role in the blog?
Right.
And we do like have...
We have roles.
We do sort of like have like things that we specialize in, right? But I think that the sort of the lines between each of us are a lot more blurry than that. I think that we like throughout the process of writing the book, we switched recipes a lot, because it was like, we thought like, maybe our dad is like the right person for this recipe. As it turns out, I was the right person for that recipe. So we would just like, when we were really struggling, we'd just be like, do you want to switch? Like, we'll just switch. Like, you do this, I'll do that. And
it was nice to have the perspectives switching. Like, you would think that we would all be pigeonholed. And even when we sort of were like, okay, let's go our default strengths, in the process of writing, it was actually like, you know what? Kind of need to like break the script a little bit and see, maybe somebody else can take a crack at it.
Right. And so, in the blog, do you do... not a lot, but you do a lot of revision. Like you'll revisit things. You'll say, so how painful was it to put something into a book that was going to get written down and then you couldn't change it again?
It was pretty
painful.
freaking painful, I have to say.
Pretty scary.
It was scary. To be like, okay, we're going to put this down on paper. We cannot change it. I mean, in theory, you have subsequent like editions of the book, but like it was a lot.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So it was scary. We were very like these recipes have been tested like to the nth degree. And there were a lot of like late nights of just reading the book over and over and over again. I personally probably read it like 10 times cover to cover, just to check for mistakes. And then also there was this aspect of like, there are 4 people. We each, like on the blog, there are things that we don't necessarily think about in terms of like our differences in how we write a recipe or how we write out instructions. But in a cookbook, like where you have a lot less space, you want more standardization. There was a lot more like, oh, my dad is like way more wordier than my mom, when he writes a recipe, and like, you know, just having to like standardize things like how you like the order of operations in a recipe, or like whether or not you choose to go into X detail about whatever. Right. That was challenging.
Right, because it's nice to have different people's introductory voices, which is clear in the book, but it would be jarring to have the flow of the recipe itself be different from recipe to recipe, because then you'd have to mentally change how you...
Right.
That's a problem I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not, like, it's something that does kind of show up that we're a little bit more lenient on the blog, and it's less jarring on the blog. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because there's so much more on the blog. We have over 1,000 recipes on the blog. But yeah, like just standardizing everything, that was a challenge. And then also just like annoying like little stuff, like measurements of like we have this recipe. We have this recipe that like calls for like 20 large walnut halves. And like our editor's like, how many cups? Like how many?
Oh God!
So like I'm like in like the.
Well, I think it was cups first, and then you had to count the halves.
The 5th pass of editing, and I like run out to the store to buy a bag of walnuts, and I'm like counting the walnuts, and it was just like stuff like that.
Hate.
Yeah.
Grams. Everything in life should be grams.
Agreed.
True.
All things everywhere should be grams.
Yeah.
So in recipes like some of the recipes and stories are attributed, right, to one of the 4 of you, and some aren't. So what's the story with those? Are those all like group efforts, or like someone didn't want to claim it, or like sometimes it's like you're like, we got this. We were talking to the folks at Chan Famous Foods, and like we got like obviously that one, but like what does it mean when it's not attributed?
When it's not attributed, well, it kind of goes back to like Sarah was saying about like standardizing, and there were times where we had to like decide when to standardize and how much to standardize, because obviously we didn't want to strip all of the uniqueness away. But, our editor did point out, she was like, if you're like constantly voice switching, it can get a little bit tiring. So there were recipes that were just more of like group effort, or like recipes that we all felt like we had like the same level of affinity for almost, or not one of us had a particularly affinity for, like where it was like, oh, we have like a unique story. It was kind of like, oh, this is kind of something that we all can like share and like reflect on as like our collective like we voice, quote unquote. So that's kind of how we tried to navigate that.
I will say that every recipe did have like a lead developer on it. So even though they're
behind the scenes.
Yeah. So even though they're generalized or not attributed to anybody, every recipe was like owned by one of the 4 of us.
Otherwise it would be chaos, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Truly.
it would. Yeah. I mean, so like the way that the development process worked was like, you go off, you do your thing, you develop the recipe. When you feel it's ready, you bring it to the group. So, and that's the way we work on the blog as well. Otherwise, it would just be like constant peanut gallery happening. So
how long is the recipe development for a blog? Like how many iterations does something have to go through for a blog where you can change it versus a cookbook, or is it same to you?
I think generally it's the same. It depends on the recipe.
Yeah.
There are recipes that we do that are just like first try slam dunk, because it's something that was built off of something else that's existing, or like a technique that we already know or we're already familiar with. And then there are recipes that take years. My dad, we mentioned this in the book and like the timeline page, but there was a sesame ball recipe. So there's like little dim sum fried sesame balls filled with like lotus paste or red bean paste. That took 3 years because it would just be like, it was like they were exploding in the oil, like steam was building up and they were just exploding. And like,
yeah. I used to, like when I'm frying mochi stuff, they just explode.
It's very dangerous.
So what's the solution?
So low and you fry it a lot longer than you think you have to over low heat.
Yeah, it's like a donut.
It's kind of like, you're just constantly kind of moving it. And then also the other big discovery by my dad was because the sesame seeds would just kind of like fall off in the fryer in the oil. So his solution was like actually kind of like crazy that this works, but you moisten the sesame seeds before you roll the ball in the seeds.
I mean, just like with a mister?
With just some water, just like a tiny bit of water. You just like kind of mix them up. And it's not, you don't wet the outside of the ball. It's the sesame seeds that need to be just slightly damp to stick on and stay on. And what's surprising about that, I guess, is like water hitting hot oil and it being okay. But I think it's just that small enough amount. So that recipe took a while. The taro puff recipe.
I did not realize that was not a separate coating.
Yeah. Isn't it mind-blowing?
It is mind-blowing.
The first time we realized, we were like, what?
You got a lot of recipes where the oil temperature control is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you mentioned in that recipe that oil temperature control is vital to get the that
wispy,
coating.
Yep.
I mean, that is nuts.
Mm-hmm.
John, you seen that recipe?
No.
You know what we're talking about? The fried taro puffs where they're like
It's like a dim sum.
nuts.
Yeah. It's all in the lard, baby.
Isn't it always? Isn't it always? Delicious lard. Well, I think you point out, I forget whether it was blog or book, but lard's the new health fat, man. You know?
I think, it's not that far off. Yeah.
I mean, it's a natural fat. You can digest it. It's not chemical.
People seem to be turning on seed oils as well. I don't
know.
Wait, turning against it?
Yeah.
Which seed oils?
Like literally all of them.
People
like
are
the
refined oil
the like
or
super
is
extreme
that-
health crunchy people.
People are against all refined things.
Yeah.
It's like whatever. It's a pendulum.
Yes.
It's a pendulum.
It's a pendulum.
All right. We have a question in I would like to get to before I just go through all the questions that I have for you. By the way, next week, you want to say who we have coming on next week, Don?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know who's on next week.
Homodashtaki from the...
Oh, right. The yogurt. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, for those of you that aren't in... I don't think they ship outside of the New York metro area, do they? I think it's just
Don't
their
think
local.
so, yeah. I
White
think just
Mustache is
local,
like some
yeah.
super fancy yogurt and Iranian Persian yogurt.
Oh, yeah.
So she'll be on in the studio next
fantastic.
week. Her book, Yogurt and Whey, I'm pretty sure we're going to have it at Kitchen Arts and Letters
Yeah, should be.
on discount. But I only saw that because I was flipping through to the question we have. So Giuseppe Musk says, and this is an interesting question, is cultural appropriation a real phenomenon in food?
I think that's interesting because, food is constantly evolving, right? Different people take a recipe and run with it. I think that when you claim a recipe is of a certain culture and is authentic, but you didn't necessarily like do your research or you didn't attribute that recipe to the source of where you got it, then I think things get a little bit dicey. But I will say that
I think it's all about the attribution game.
Yeah.
Because there are certain, especially now in like the world of food media, like the lid is being blown off all sorts of things where it's like, oh, this technique. And then it sort of becomes like adopted as like the best way to do something. So like, let's take the example of the cornstarch slurry and the scrambled eggs, right? That's a great technique from Chinese cooking. And it's like, you could just make regular breakfast scrambled eggs with that. And it's like, that's not so loaded in terms of like cultural appropriation as an example, but I think it's nice to know that it comes from like a Chinese cooking technique and to like say that
To acknowledge
rather
it,
than
yeah.
for like, X big big box mart food media company being like, oh, well, we came up with this technique and it's so
we
brilliant.
discovered it.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
or so okay, so like the question, right, is, and I think a lot of us are struggling with this. I know in the book that I'm theoretically writing, I'm also struggling with this because I spent a long time like trying to learn new techniques, so they come from everywhere. You know what I mean? But in the early 2000s, a lot of bartenders would look at certain Japanese techniques, and they would then be like, then they would teach the Japanese techniques to non-Japanese people, and then kind of like they would make a business out of it. In other words, like this became their unique selling point, that they had this kind of thing. Isn't that where it becomes more? So when someone's like, I am now the conduit through which you can learn this Japanese technique, that seems to me to be clearly problematic, because you're literally saying, I can teach somebody else about this technique. It's not just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. It depends a little bit on, I guess it depends on like your level of training in that technique and how much it was actually informed by like the culture that it comes from. And also like, I don't know. I think the perspective of like having respect for that culture and wanting to share it with people isn't a bad thing.
But I think where rubber meets the road for a lot of people is like, who's profiting off of it? And then that becomes like the conflict. But I think
and whether that's the only person who gets to talk about it.
Right.
And I think we struggle with that sometimes because like as Chinese bloggers, it's almost like, okay, you want to be the respected source for Chinese cooking, and you want to be like respected as a representative, as an advocate, whatever word you want to use. However, like on the flip side, it's like a double-edged sword. You don't want to necessarily be pigeonholed all the time of like, oh, the Chinese person talks about Chinese food and that's it.
Right.
So I think that's what's annoying. That's what's super annoying about it, is that as a Chinese cook and a Chinese food blog, like I'm largely only allowed to talk about Chinese food, right? Whereas somebody who's not necessarily from that culture, can talk like have their take on a Chinese recipe, on a Thai recipe, on a German recipe or whatever. And I feel like that part of it is challenging for me.
If we're not sharing on Instagram like noodles and rice, whatever, people just like tune out almost. And I'm like, we've adopted like this policy where it's like, hey, if we're talking about food that's not Chinese, y'all better sit up and listen, because that means it's really good, and it's just for us.
It's just for us.
For
that's
our records, our personal recipe archive records. Because otherwise people are just like, oh, why should I care if you're talking about banana bread? And I'm like, well, I have eaten banana bread my whole freaking life.
Delicious.
Thank you very much.
And did your core audience get that or not?
I think our core audience gets it. I think they do. But yeah, it's kind of this broader thing when you look at the world of food creators, like who gets to be like the person that like spans all types of food and who does it, or who gets like kind of stereotyped.
What? Jesus. All right, listen. Couple things. Salt baked chicken, the Hakka recipe, was the only unmitigated disaster of the past 5 years because I ruined a wok.
Uh-oh.
I tried to do a mishmash. I read you guys post on it, but I didn't do it in an oven. I used a boatload of salt. I tried to get it, and I overheated the bottom of my wok. And then I realized in the book you published a simpler recipe. Is that the recipe I should use? The salt chicken?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So easy.
Oh,
Just use that one.
All right, and also the roast pork belly, that what they call in the restaurants down here roast pig.
Yes.
That is also an interesting recipe where you give credit to another blog, and like that is my favorite thing of all. To like, if I'm walking down the street, the thing that catches me in a window is roast pig. I'm like roast pig. And much like who was it that did that? That was you did that, right? Like it's like much more so than the regular roast pork. The
I agree.
Yeah.
It's my favorite too.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's really good.
So is that recipe like super on point?
I think it is. you should try it and see for
So
yourself.
I noticed you didn't do any of the baking soda or any of the other stuff. You did vinegar to keeps it blonde, right? That keeps it from getting too dark when you're doing the roast. A little bit of vinegar.
Yep. And I think the key for me in the book version of the recipe is the very short blanching of the skin, because the skin
key.
is so leathery. It can be really hard to poke the holes into it to get it to puff up and be crispy. But if you blanch it really briefly, it helps out a lot.
All right. So listen, I thought I was going to be able to talk more about more stuff with you, but if you want to read about the white cut chicken or by the way, the chicken wings, how are they? Because they're a wet on wet. I was going to talk to you for 20 minutes about Willie Mae's Scotch House and how wet on wet. Is that a working recipe? You like that recipe a lot?
Absolutely
It's
works.
very good.
Yes.
Generations old.
And sorry. The duck that is basically like halfway to confit, and you steam it, which reminds me of what Nathan Myhrvold used to say. He's like, you don't need to do confit, you can just steam your confit. He doesn't talk like that. And but you only steam it like 30 minutes, so is it still chewy? Well, what would happen if you did it for like an hour and a half?
I mean,
have you tied it?
I mean, in Chinese cooking, this fall off the bone meat is not really a
It's
thing.
not the goal.
You want a little bit of toothsomeness to your meat, so you could and try it. I personally have not tried it, but I like my meat to be a little bit have a bite to it.
Okay. But that's a delicious recipe, though?
It's really
very good.
That's the one your mom got from her buddy?
Yes.
Yes, from her actually my grandmother's coworkers at the dress beating factory.
Yeah, Midtown, yeah. I used to live in the Garment District. All right, listen, go by the Walks of Life, check out the blog. For what's interesting is sometimes the book has a simplified version that's not on the blog, and sometimes they're different. You point to the blog back and forth, so it's a good thing to have in your home to point back to the living document that is the blog. Sarah and Kaitlin from the Walks of Life, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Cooking Issues.